me, I want to talk about Zexor for a second because I want to draw a connection here for anybody who's into like graffiti history or whatever. So I moved to New York in 2009, I think, or I don't know. I can't remember the dates too well, but I was there like around that time, and I was living in first down in Ridgewood, and then I moved to Bushwick, and obviously you want to go get the money spots. So I used to scope out rooftops in Manhattan. That was my goal. I just wanted to hit all of the virgin runner roofs, And writers, please go find virgin spots. Stop going over people or crowding. All the shit looks corny. Go try and do something on your own. You see, people that do that, they'll be remembered. Nobody's gonna remember how you have a tiny little fill-in on a wall with like 40 other fill-ins, But I would look out for those spots, but then I also wanted to paint in the hood that I lived in. Even though like Bushwick at the time was just getting crushed by kids who, no disrespect, like I looked at most of them as toys. I felt like stylistically I was on a different level, and I want to present my graffiti, in Manhattan, right? So that was it. But I was also like, yo, fuck it, like it's some herb shit to only be doing that. You gotta paint in the hood that you're in. So I went out one night, and I painted on some dead tracks. Come back a couple nights later, and Zexor had gone over it, for no reason. I'm very careful not to step on any toes. If I'm in somebody else's city or something, I don't go over any graffiti, because even if it's toy, you don't know if that person's dead. You don't know if that person's locked up. You don't know shit. So like, just as a general rule, go find a spot that nobody's painted. There's tons of surfaces that haven't been painted. This is common logic, and I wish more kids thought this way. But I painted the spot. Zexor went over it. I didn't really know anything about him. I went and I fixed the spot. I went out another night, and I'm walking down underneath that elevated line on Broadway, and I see this big husky kid walking towards me, and I'm like, oh shit, me and him are the only ones on the block. We both have book bags on, and like, New York is the only city that I've ran into writers on the street. It doesn't happen where I'm from because there just aren't that many. And I'm like looking at this kid, I'm like, I wonder if he's a writer. But either way, this is a big ass motherfucker, and I'm like worried a little bit, right? Like, I'm like, should I cross? If I cross, he's gonna know I'm soft. So fuck it, I'm gonna stay on this side. So I'm like, I'm walking towards him, and we pass each other. We look at each other. We pass each other. We walk about a block apart. I turn back, and this dude stopped, just staring at me from like a block away. And he's like, yo, what up? And I'm like, what's up? And he starts walking towards me. And from a distance, I'm like, yo, are you cool? You know what I mean? Like, yo, are we good? Are we good? And he's not saying shit. He's just walking towards me. And I'm like, fuck, should I run? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to run. I'm just going to, fuck it. I'm going to take this loss, whatever. And he like walks straight up to me, and we're like 2 feet away. And he's like, yeah, you write what you write. And I was just like, I write Hert. You know what I mean? I just put it out there. And he was like, oh shit, I just went over you. I write Zexor. I'm like, yeah, I know. Actually, I just fixed that spot. So, what's up? What do we do now? And he was just like, honestly, man, I seen your shit, and I went online and I saw that you were from out of town, and I'm from Bushwick. You know what I mean? And I seen you coming here getting shine, and I don't want you to be shining like that. He just said that to me, like, just straight up, like, I don't want you to be shining. And honestly, part of me respected it. Like, part of me was like, yeah, that's right. I'm not from here. You're from here. You know what I mean? Like, and I was like, he's like, but real talk. He's like, I just wanted to paint with you. And dude, so many people beef just because they want to paint with you. You know what I mean? But that's neither here nor there. We immediately put it to bed, and right away he was like, let's go paint. So we're like bombing along Broadway or whatever, and like had a fantastic night. Ended up becoming good friends with him. And like, oh, and I forgot to mention, this is an important part too. We're walking down the street, we're getting to know each other, we're talking in between, like catching tags and shit. And I'm like, so how long you been writing? You know what I mean? Like, why do you write? Like, where did it come from? And he's like, oh, well, my father used to do graffiti. I was like, oh shit, what did your father write? And he's like, ASP WTO. And I was like, yo, that blew my mind, because get this, man, ASP WTO back in like the late 80s or early 90s. My boy Tilo could probably verify all this, because he came out to Buffalo. He was like dodging a case or something like that. And he came out here to cool off. And he came to the west side of Buffalo, which at the time was a little bit rough. And he linked up with this whole like little contingency of Puerto Ricans in the west side. And he put them on to graffiti. He started telling them, come to New York. They all went to New York, got gold fronts and shit, came back to Buffalo and just started bombing. And they did it with style, you know, because ASP had dope style. So he put all these writers on and essentially started the graffiti scene in Buffalo. Of course, there was like, you know, a lull after that, like where like, you know, the late 90s, not a ton happened until, you know, Lions and Merc Jr. and like, you know, Atak and a couple other people like started coming out and doing shit, you know, Spade, BF, shout out to Spade, like shout out everybody in BF, I got to represent. But, you know, ASP started graffiti in Buffalo, and like without ASP doing that, there's a good chance, actually I know for a fact, I would never have started writing graffiti. And, you know, there I am in 2009 walking with his son, with Zexor, and he's showing me this tattoo of ASP he's got on his chest. And, you know, that it's moments like that are like so crazy. It makes the world a small place, but it kind of showed me that I was on the right path. You know what I mean? I was like, when I was young, I would go online and I would watch state your name videos and I would watch old interviews. You know what I mean? Like, you know, just like wanting to be a part of that and like connecting those dots. That was my goal back in the day. And it definitely happened. So, you know, I ended up linking Zex up with a bunch of the homies, and then, you know, he did his thing and, you know, became a legend in his own right. And like, you know, rest in peace to Zexor as well. And anybody else who's passed away. It's unfortunate. We got to stop, you know, taking losses. I mean, and definitely give people their flowers while they're here. You know, like that's why, not to take it back again, but like, you know, CH, man, like I got mad respect for you. I appreciate everything you've done in the game, and everybody else that's doing this. You know, even the writers that aren't so talkative, that don't do podcasts because maybe they're just quiet people or whatever. I see you and I appreciate what you've done. You know, like Atak is probably one of the most productive people in the world that I know. He's never going to do a graffiti podcast interview. You know what I mean? It's just everybody approaches things differently. But all of those contributions that are made, those are impactful. It's not about fucking likes. You know what I'm saying? It's not about retweets, reshares, whatever the fuck. Like graffiti is an organic subculture, and you know, you get out what you put in. So if you're real and you put in good effort, you know, I've gotten respect from people like Jest when I met him, very respectful. Nove when I met him, you know, when I was locked up, I got a letter from Revs. You know what I mean? That's crazy. Like it's like the respect and the love that I've gotten from the graffiti community. I mean, yo, like me doing this podcast, I haven't done graffiti realistically on the street in like a decade. You know what I mean? I've been isolated. I was in New York in 2015, and I was living in an apartment with a bunch of other graffiti writers, and I felt like I was like still a part of the community. But since I've been back home, isolated. I don't talk to graffiti writers. I don't, you know, sometimes occasionally we'll shoot a DM back and forth, but realistically, man, I'm off the radar. So for me to pop out and do a little podcast and for people to care, like that's love, you know.